there's a whole bunch of answers to that question. And there's more than one answer. I'll put it to you this way. Because Yehuda was dispersed among many nations. Part of Yehuda went into Iraq and Iran. Part of Yehuda remained in the Holy Land. Part of Yehuda went down into Egypt and the Upper Nile, and ultimately into Africa. But the critical issue is this: when you look at again, this is why the story of Zarak and Peretz becomes so important, because Zarak, who is basically cast aside in Scripture, he's the scapegoat. We're not going to talk about him. And when you get to 1 Chronicles 5:1, talking about that the birthright belonged to Reuben, but it was taken away from him because he went up to his father's couch, and it was given to Joseph in the hands of Ephraim and Manasseh. Then it says something very interesting, whose genealogy is not to be reckoned.
Yeah, what does that mean?
That means you no longer talk about the genealogy of Ephraim and the genealogy of Manasseh. We're done talking about it. We're not going to talk about who their sons were. We're only going to talk about, from this point forward, the genealogy of Yehuda through Peretz. So Scripture is really kind of myopic. It's only dealing with the genealogy of Peretz and how this results in Mashiach. We don't get the story of Zarak. Now, there's other researchers out there that have looked into it. So on one hand, in 1 Kings, I believe it is, they mislabel the children of Zarak as the sons of Machol. Well, the King James interpreters looked at that and said that must be a proper noun. Capital M-A-C-H-O-L, Machol. Well, it's not a proper noun. It's actually an adjective. They were the sons of round dancing.
Okay.
The sons of round dancing. Well, who are these sons? Well, they're extremely, extremely important. When you're talking Calcol, Dardas, Ethan, Haman, and Zimri, these are the five sons of Zarak. They're mentioned there in 1 Kings, but not attributed to Zarak. But they are reiterated in 1 Chronicles as the sons of Zarak. Okay, so 1 Chronicles tells us Calcol, Darda, Ethan, Haman, and Zimri, right? So now we know, and I've had lots of discussions with these people in various groups. Calcol is the one who formed the city of Athens. Darda was also known as Dardanus. The Dardanelles, the straits going up to Istanbul, were named after him. He formed the city of Troy. And when he formed the city of Troy, he governed over the people of Lud, or the Lydians, which were children of Shem, the Lydians. And Troy was governing over the Lydians. Ethan would form the city of Carthage, and he would also form the city of Cadiz, Spain. And then Haman would actually go up into what we now call Bulgaria and Romania. The house of Haman was up there. And he was assigned the guilt for what took place with Esther. And if you read in the book of Hadassah, which is the full account of Esther, not the redacted version.
Yeah.
Beautiful book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Haman, it is told, was from Macedonia, right? So this is where Haman was located, was up there, right? So then it was one of the children of Calcol named Gaiolathus who would lead a huge body out of Greece, and they would go back into Egypt to see what was going on in Egypt. Well, nothing was going on in Egypt, and he took on the name Ai. And this is also described in Jasher. There was some battles that took place. But from there, he left, and he went across North Africa, going to Carthage, where some of his people stayed. And he also continued until he entered into the Iberian Peninsula, which, by the way, its original name was Celtiberia. And he comes into the portion called Lusitania. And at Lusitania, they formed a port city, which was the port of Galathus, or Portugal. And the Gauls then would inhabit this whole Lusitanian coast, including the Basques, which were of the house of Galathus, including Western France, which were called the Gauls in Brittany, and then up into Cornwall in Britain, and then up into Ireland. And so this house of Galathus was the house of Zarak. This was the house of Zarak. And they brought with them the Gaelic language, which is the language still spoken in Ireland and Scotland today, Gaelic. Right. And this was the house of Gael, the house of Galathus. And he was also known as Brutus. But Brutus is a misspelling because people didn't understand the Hebrew. So you had Beit, Resh, Tav, Shin, and they said, oh, well, those must be U's in between. Brutus. No, put I's in between there and make this the scene a Sheen. British, which means
British.
covenant man.
Mm-hmm.
He was the covenant
Right.
man, which was a title, not a name. His real name was Galathus. And so Brutus comes into the British Isles around 1189 BC. And the Gaels would form this people, and eventually a Gaelic king would take the throne, Yahuah the Herman, in 581 BC with the blessing of Jeremiah. And so the true house of Judah, who holds the scepter in his hands and the lawgiver between his feet, is actually the Gaelic people.
Right.
And the Roman Church knows this, and that's why it has been nothing but burn the Irish to the ground from the beginning to the end. Send St. Patrick over there, kill them off, force them into Catholicism, tell them that this is their ancient history, on and on and on and on and on and on. And the Roman yoke is on the Irish like you would not believe. And even to this very moment, this is what's going on because they cannot allow the true history of the true kings. So when you look at what happened with those line of kings from Yahuah the Herman through to Edward the Bruce, ultimately to Robert the Bruce, and now my friend Joao in Portugal, he went up to the island of Iona and discovered that, in fact, Robert the Bruce was protecting the Sabbath keepers and the feast keepers from the Roman invasion in the hands of the English army and defeated them. He defeated Edward III, who was a direct descendant of William the Conqueror, a French Catholic, a Norman Catholic who had invaded the British Isles to place the Roman Church in charge. Robert the Bruce was the last defender of the great faith that had been brought to the British Isles that came through Galathus with the planting of the House of Zarak, which, by the way, is marked with a red rampant lion.
Yeah.
Wherever you see the red rampant lion, this is the symbol of the House of Zarak. And so the red rampant lion and the red hand marked throughout Ireland. This was Galathus and the planting of the House of Zarak. The Druids would then become the planting of the Oaks of Righteousness, which, by the way, Jeremiah 1 clearly spells out that Jeremiah would witness the tearing down of the one Jerusalem and its replanting elsewhere. That's in Jeremiah 1. And so Jeremiah saw it, and he saw the replanting. So when you look at the passage in Isaiah 61, it is really discussing about, I'm going to give you cloaks of glory for the ashes of mourning, and I'm going to call you, and you're going to be called oaks of righteousness. This was all about discussing those who were mourning over the destruction of Jerusalem and its replanting in Ireland at Tara. So this house and these house of kings were the true kings in the line of David who would have the scepter and the lawgiver between their feet until Shiloh comes.